The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome back to our weekly podcast called Mission Minded. It's a great show. It's a business show. And we do it with a man who knows all about business and non-for-profits. Michael Coleman is the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank down there in beautiful Montgomery, Alabama, 35 counties they cover. And, of course, we also do a show called Bite by Bite, which is specific to, of course, the Heart of Alabama Food Bank and Feeding America. And we'll talk about that after the show. You can hear these shows right here 5 days a week on TKR, Tony Kurre Radio, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Michael, how you doing, brother? Everything good?
Yeah, it's been a busy week, good weeks, good things have happened. So I'm very thankful.
I know you have a topic you want to get into, and these are some lifestyle upgrades that can make surprisingly huge differences in the happiness of you. And these are going to be somewhat personal for you too, which I always invite. But I do want to ask you about it. I'm not into the stock. I'm one of the 40% that's not in the stock market, only because I went through a divorce and my ex took all my stocks. I don't have any stocks left. Right now, she can worry about her 401k. I don't have one, so I'm starting over again, which is kind of nice because I do remember 2008. I remember the downturn in some of the markets, and I'd be sitting there and I go, holy crap, I just lost $65,000 today. And that will blow your mind a little bit. And it's funny because on the days you lose 65 grand. On the days you win 30. You never win what you lose. And I'm assuming that's what's happened with the stock market this past week. I'm assuming you're in the stock market. It's kind of hard not to be in the stock market. We're in a lot of business ventures where those businesses are part of the market. So we're kind of indirectly in the market, but just talk about the craziness that is, the NASDAQ and the S&P right now and the Dow Jones and how we just need to chill out a little bit. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so I always want to preface any comment I make with, that is not my career field. I'm giving it to you from a layman's perspective. So I don't have millions of dollars of investments either. So I most people can probably relate. You know, I got a 401k that goes in there. And But it's what we've seen is it's very volatile, but a lot of people tend to do, and I get it. Let's say you do have $1 million in there. The stock market loses 10% in a day, and you look down and you had $1 million and you're planning retirement, and all of a sudden you see the stock market down to 900,000. Man, I lost 100,000. I need to get out. So panic sets in. And people start making moves. And most financial people will tell you, look, don't take one action and panic. And because what happens is you end up selling low. It's just people do it too. When a stock really takes off, people sometimes buy it high and then it reduces. I think the most important thing for me was I was trying to ask myself, okay, is this about the instability that Donald Trump is bringing through the tariff talk and the uncertainty? So in other words, is the market just spoofed? Spoofed. Is the market just spooked right now? Or are there some underlying fundamentals with the economy that lead to think, this is a readjustment based on corporate earnings and something not coming through like they should? And so really the stock market's fine. And then all of a sudden there's this announcement. And so it sinks. It's all out of fear. Well, when it does that, it's always going to come back because the underlying fundamentals are still solid. For instance, just one indicator, and there's several indicators you can look at. One of those was the job report just came out for the previous month. It was like 285,000 jobs, which was higher than had been predicted. Inflation just came out, and it's lower than predicted. So those two dynamics, and I get it. So it depends on what your view is, because politics come into even financial management and people who are, Trump's going to keep it down, and they have their own interest, I should say, where they're trying to push you to equities or push you towards bond, whatever it is. But the bottom line is we saw as soon as Trump made the announcement, he was dropping the tariffs down to 10%. Boom, they shot up, right back up. And then he turns around and he says, yeah, but I'm gonna battle it out with China. Again, more uncertainty. Boom, it drops again. So there's going to be the shock. I did see something very interesting to illustrate why not to panic. If you go back to COVID, COVID lost during that. We lost a third of the market during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was some underlying fundamentals because people weren't out shopping. Businesses were crashing, so disposable income. I mean, it really was an economic downturn. It wasn't, the markets weren't spooked. It was a fundamental shift in the market that caused us to lose a third of the values. But if you go back and look at where the S&P was back when it crashed, it has doubled from where the previous high was. Mm-hmm. So it didn't just recover in the last 4 years, it's more than doubled. So I always go back, if you go all the way back to the stock market crash, I think 29, the stock market has had a very consistent, if you look over that, consistent gain. It doesn't mean that every year it's going to gain. Sometimes it'll gain, but I think one time it was 11 or 12% on average of what it gains over time. And you might have a couple of years. The economy is very cyclical. You're gonna have recessions. I don't care who's in power. There are gonna be times where you have recessions. Stocks are gonna lag. There's adjustments and downturns, but it never stays there.
Yeah,
it always turns back around at some point. The question is, if you're pulling your money out, if you're a short-term investor and you're like, hey, I'm only going to put in here for a quick 3-month term, like you're playing stocks like that, then that can be catastrophic. But most people are like me. Every month, it's just dollar cost averaging. You know, you're invested into mutual funds. You're going to put $200 into your retirement every payday, mm-hmm. or $500, whatever it is. If the stock has gone down, then you buy more of it with that amount of money. If it goes up, you're buying less. That's just the dollar cost averaging over time. And it's typically going to work out.
I think when I first got involved in the market, I was in my 20s. It was the 7-year rule. There had never been a 7-year term anywhere in the history of the United States where the market had been down. So you knew that if you stayed in for 7 years, you were going to make money one way or another. Until recently, that held true. I also think that having not been in the market over the last 5 or 6 years because of some financial things I'm going through myself, I'm seeing that 39, 40,000 number, and I'm thinking, well, I can remember when it just was at 10,000 or 11,000 or 12,000. And I do think a lot of people believe that maybe our market was setting itself up for somewhat of a correction. And so eventually it happens. It goes up, it pops, it goes down, then it goes up, it goes, and that's a climber never goes straight up. It goes like this. It's like, it's like the Himalayan climber. And so I think that played into it a little bit. What's really surprising to me is that one man is worth that much. I mean, I'm sure Donald Trump is getting his nuts off on knowing that he is responsible for the loss of $6 trillion in the world economy. That is the true definition of powerful. If you wanted to see if Donald Trump is powerful, he just proved to himself that he is the most powerful man on the moon, because he not only changed our market, but he changed the fundamentals of every other market in the world. And I mean, that's why a lot of people are coming to the door wanting to wheel and deal and do things. Now, China, not so much, because they're number one and we're number two. But it is amazing, because it's all based off sheer confidence. I don't know what people are selling and buying. But yeah. Yeah.
But think about this, because it brings up your point, brings up some thoughts, some additional thoughts to that. One person, like an average Joe like me, could look at that and go, well, where'd that 6.4 million go? $1 trillion. Where'd it go? And we're like, it just vanished. And, if some people look at our whole financial system like that, in that it's all just kind of smoke and mirrors. Because if you think about it,
Bitcoin. I mean,
that kind of stuff. Yeah. We assess that we assign value, and it's the same thing in terms of when companies go up. Now, my dad, I may have said this before, my dad had zero understanding of the stock market. And his theory was, look, what goes up must come down. And so he would never invest because he just says, it's got to come back down. Well, I think people can look at the market as being inflated. And there are times when, smart people, when they're like, okay, I'm looking at a stock and I'm believing that's as far as it's going to go. And they sell when it's high. And those are people who pay attention. And that's where you really make your money. You buy low, you sell high. But I'll tell you what this shows to me from a broader perspective, more than anything else, is how globally connected our economies are. And one of the things that I think make people like Donald Trump, for better or for worse, not like him as a person necessarily, set his personality aside, but in a globalistic economy, this is why we bring in $50 billion a year in tariffs, but pay out $350 billion. Mm-hmm. So for every dollar tariff we bring in, we're paying out to other countries. And you think about that and you go, well, why is that fair? And you go, well, we're trying to help this country. We're trying to do this. We're trying to control here. Oh, we're giving you this favor, this, or it's in our friend's best interest. And Trump comes along and goes, wait a minute. These are taxpayers, hardworking men and women who are, this is what ultimately having to pay the cost. Mm-hmm. Then you come across like our adversaries like China, and you see these tens of billions per month of trade deficit. I used to hear this all the time 20, 30 years ago. The news would report that the trade deficit with China this year with this month was $60 billion. And I go, okay, so what does that mean? The average person just really couldn't understand that. But when you look at, we have been at a disadvantage because we want people to like us. We feel like in some way over time it became in our national interest, and maybe it did at one time. Trump comes along and goes, I'm looking out for America first and foremost. And if you look at what his base argument is, now again, he sends markets because you got to always pay attention to what Trump does and not what he says. Yeah. But he says, and I know the markets get skittish, but he said, if you're going to charge me 30%, we're going to charge you that reciprocal tariff. That's what you're charging us. If you come back, he keeps talking about all these deals. Well, Israel, for instance, came back and said, hey, we're dropping all tariffs. And he goes, okay, well, then we'll drop all tariffs. So, but how can a country look at us and say, yeah, we're hitting you for 30% tariffs and then get mad at us when we say, well, we're not charging you any. Yeah. We're going to go up to 10%. Well, now I know that's not everybody because we hit China back hard, but China has been stealing our intellectual property. China has been putting people in our schools. China has, and other countries, buying farmland, businesses, property, all these kind of things. So China is a bad player. They have tried to exert undue influence into the Panama Canal and other areas because there's a way to work around. So let's say, for instance, that we assign tariffs to China. Well, what China then does is they will sell to a country who then backdoors it into America to get access to our buyers. Yeah. But they skirt the tariffs that way because tariffs are not. And so I know Trump is a bull in a china shop. I know that people were panicking, but the bottom line is I do think Trump, for better or for worse, is acting in what he at least believes is in the best interest of America. Time will tell if his approach is right or not. But I do think it makes sense. I don't think they always explain it or really have the time, because 24-hour news is always looking for, and a lot of mainstream media hates Trump. And so they're never going to try to present a logical argument that it makes sense. They're just going to present, hey, the world's on fire.
My only question to that, Mike, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Everyone keeps talking about what he's trying to do is the right thing to do, but it's going to take years, if not decades, to correct it all. If you're really planning on getting all those jobs and everything back in here, you just don't build a manufacturing plant over the course of next week and say, okay, let's
sure.
get 30,000. It takes a lot of time. And so I hope people are much like the market, the Warren Buffs of the world, they're fine because they're involved in the Pepsis, the Coca-Colas, and the freight trains. They're into the things that are slow moving, yet they're always increasing. He's not into penny stocks. And that's why he's a billionaire. And so, I hope people, and it depends, just to kind of go back to what you were talking about, your 401k. I remember my dad, he had a 401k, but he wasn't working anymore. And so when he lost half his 401k, that hurt. I mean, he went from $500,000 to $250,000, and that money was gone. And there's no way for him to get it back. For the average working person, even people in their 50s that are continually putting money in, you are buying low. So just chill out. It's going to work out. It's going to be fine because it is going to go back up, and you'll see that happen. I hate it for people, that retired people, that lose a large, and that's why, when you get older, you're supposed to get more conservative.
Just in the last week, though, even though it was a huge crash, it was a huge comeback.
Yeah.
So I mean, they recouped it almost the next day. Not quite. It didn't go full back, and then it dropped again. Mm-hmm. When it's all said and done, when there's a little bit more stability. So this isn't going to be like this is a 3-year loss. This is, and let me speak to the just a couple of things about the fact, because I've really kind of delved into this a little bit because I'm wanting to know, and I know it probably sounds like that I am a cheerleader for Trump, and I really don't want to come to be, because I want to be critical where I think he deserves to be criticized. The people that talk about that, are the same people that said, well, you can't close the border. For 4 years, Joe Biden said, we can't close the border without more legislation being passed. And right now, the border crossings are down 96%. And he did it in 2 months. And so on the manufacturing, you're right. You can't come in and build a huge manufacturing plant in 2 months. But what you can do is you can begin to, through this negotiation, is ultimately get tariffs either down or match tariffs. But what it's this was over a month ago. I saw a list of the number of companies, and I'll just use Honda because it stood out to me. Honda committed to move from, I think, Mexico into Indiana to build Honda Civics. Mm-hmm. Now, we know the impact of car manufacturing in Alabama because we're kind of the new Detroit, if you will, the new Michigan. And we saw, we know that takes a couple of years from the announcement to actually get the plant up and going. But once that money is dedicated, now you start hiring construction workers. It can almost all right away begin to start having some economic impact. But what's really important is when companies make that billions of dollars of commitment, they don't move in and then typically move right back out. Yep. That's going to be there now for that community for the next 20, 25, 30 years. And you've got all sorts of companies saying, look, if I've got to pay higher tariffs, it makes that I no longer gain the advantage of cheap labor. And so even Apple has come in and said a $500 billion, investment, on and on and on. So it's all going to take time, but the tariffs won't rebound when the manufacturing is built. That's a longer term goal. When the scare tactics and the bravado dies down, which with Trump, you say, does it ever dry down? And over the next few weeks, you begin to see some of the deals being announced of, oh, yeah, here's another country we've got to sign a deal with. I think, and I think China's going to come to the table, because I will say this. China has, now I'm regurgitating right now things that I've heard and other experts have said. China has a huge problem on the horizon. They have a very aging population.
Yep.
You got to remember going back 20, 30 years ago about the one child rule.
Yeah, they
thought
changed
they were
that.
outgrowing their capacity.
Mm-hmm.
They changed it after, but they've lost a generation.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, you got to remember, they only wanted boys. Well, guess what? Boys got to have somebody to mate with.
Mm-hmm.
And so women were not valued as much, but now they're not having as many children, and the population is getting older. So to have an army, to have a thriving economy, on and on and on, they've got some economic challenges coming up. So their economy is foundationally strong. I don't know the exact size of both comparison, but I know fundamentally it's not as strong. So what Trump is betting is we can survive upheaval with China longer than they can survive upheaval with us, that we will get them to the table. We'll have more strength when it does get to the table. But as long as that fight's going on, it's probably going to not make the market crash like it did, but have some issues. So it's going to be an ongoing struggle. It's not going to be easy.
This reminds me a little bit of going to a marriage counselor. So guy and girl are together, things aren't working out, but they're going to be okay. We'll deal with it. We're just going to kind of go through it. It's good. There's some things that you do that I don't like, and there's things I do you don't like, but and then you finally decide to go ahead and get in front of a mediator. And it's going to be okay, and it's going to be better, but it's like, holy crap, wow, this is out there right now. We're talking about this, now's the time to put your cards on the table. You've been holding on to these things for years and years and years, all of a sudden, and it's like, and I think a lot of people in this country who were all about make America great didn't know how to make that happen, and he's trying to do that, and he's in the process of doing that, and it's like, holy crap, it's scary. It's scary because a lot of
no doubt it is.
A lot of things come out, and like you said, you got to take your medicine. Again, I'm not a proponent or an opponent of him as well, but if we want to do this, but again,
see, anytime you and I have done this in organizational structures, which is you're going against the grain because you see where you're going. And you're and you're like, no, and you can tell people like Trump says, oh, it's going to be better. He said, no, there's going to be some upheaval along the way. It's not going to be a fun journey always, but we're going to get. And I remember when I came into this organization, there were tons of changes and tons of upheaval, and people could have come in 6 months into the process and gone, this guy's an idiot. He has no idea. Everybody from day to day is like, what are we going to have a job tomorrow? And there's so much instability, so much. You did do
that. I remember you did that with the Jimmy Hill mission as well. You came up with some ideas. You were like, you're going to do what? And I remember being part of that too. And kudos to you for turning that around.
And so lots of times when you step out, because I heard, matter of fact, it was just 2 days ago, I was listening to some pundits. I hate to say experts, but they're pundits, and they get on there and they say, these are Republicans who say, because traditionally Republicans have never been a fan of tariffs. There's a lot of past Nancy Pelosi, there's a video of her on the House floor saying, see how few tariffs we charge China. We need to really up. I mean, she was all about tariffs. So Democrats were very high on taxing other countries. Mm-hmm. Republicans have also always said, this is going to depress the economy. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt trade, on and on and on. And now some people are getting in line simply because of political fear of Donald Trump. Some people, I think, are starting to say, well, maybe I had it wrong. Maybe, but right now, Donald Trump's not only going against Democrats, it wouldn't matter. He could say, I love the baby Jesus. And right now, Democrats are going to hate him for it.
Yeah.
But Republicans are providing a lot of resistance. Some are going along, but they're not going along rah, rah, rah. But I guarantee you, if it does work, if he does accomplish, and he's on the other side of it, he'll be more powerful because he'll be able to say, you see all that whining and complaining that took place all these experts, and they said it's never going to happen. Well, here we are now. Now tell us where. But there's always going to be something on a large scale to complain about or to criticize Trump on. He'll screw up in a lot of different other ways with his mouth. But again, he's saying, this is what I believe is going to happen. I think he told the country, he said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight China. I'm going to get these tariffs, and now we're on the roller coaster right now. And it's a little bumpy and it's a little unsettling. Some people get motion sick, but we'll see. Now, is it possible that the experts were right all along and tariffs are going to destroy our country? Well, guess what?
Find out.
If he does, but we've never done what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
If we get on the other side, it's just going to be interesting to see what's going to be people's narrative going forward.
And the other thing too, Mike, is he did this overnight. I heard this morning that we're supposed to go through Congress when we do tariffs, and he's just putting out executive order after executive order after executive order, and he's asking for forgiveness. He's not asking for permission. He's doing it with judges, doing anything else, and he's turning the world on its head, which is amazing because most of us think to ourselves, well, there's no way you can get that done possibly in 4 years because there's just too much red tape to get through. He's thrown out the red tape. There is no red tape. He's I want to change this. I'm going to do it right now, and I'm doing an executive order. And people are like, well, we're going to have to go to court. Well, there's so many things he's doing right now that we can't possibly. There's not enough courts to carry all the cases. So good for him from that standpoint. But I mean, tomorrow he could sit there and say, okay, it didn't work, and everything's off the table, and the market's going right, and we go right back to where we were. But that everyone is. So anyway, great stuff. Appreciate you. Mission Minded. We do this show every single day during the week. Of course, 5 days a week here on the TKR app. And coming up here next, it's Bite by Bite. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.